I would like to thank the Lakewood Public Library for this opportunity. It's greatly appreciated. I have divided my remarks into three sections. The first, my experiences in the military that influenced the writing of this book. Secondly, how I went from not being a writer to being a writer. And thirdly, some thoughts on the book and some of the detail within the book. So first, what was I doing in the military that caused me to later write this book? After I graduated from college, I attended Navy Officer Candidate School, was graduated and then commissioned in Officer Candidate School as an ensign, and assigned to the USS Morton in San Diego, California. In the roughly 18 months I was on the Morton, we made one deployment to the Western Pacific, specifically off the coast of Vietnam, and specifically our task was to support Army and Marine land troops with naval gunfire support. That gave me some information and knowledge of the war, and certainly some information and knowledge of military maneuvers and the role that the Navy played in those. After the Morton, I was assigned to a swift boat in Vietnam. And swift boats were very different than what most people think of the Navy as being, with the initial thoughts being big ships, carriers, cruisers, battleships, destroyers. Well, the swift boat was much smaller. It was 50 feet in length. It had 6 men as its complement. It was very fast. It was highly maneuverable. It had a weapon system that was really formidable. And its mission, which was the most important aspect of the swift boats, was to patrol and secure the coastline, the channels, and the rivers against the coastline to prevent the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese from controlling and operating in there. And we did that successfully, I believe. There was a lot of firefighting. There was a lot of action. It was intense when it happened. It was a special command. I'm hesitant to say unique, but it could be a unique command. In roughly 9 years in Vietnam that swift boats operated, there were only 3,500 men that operated on them. I was talking to a friend of mine who was also a commanding officer of a swift boat just a couple days ago, and we both think there's probably less than 1,000 of those men alive today. It was a great experience for a young man. It was a great experience for somebody who was interested in the military. After my year in Vietnam, and that was spent primarily in what the military called I Corps, and I Corps was the northernmost 5 provinces of South Vietnam. The northern border of I Corps was the DMZ, the demilitarized zone between North and South Vietnam. I operated primarily out of Da Nang, a city north of Da Nang called Hue, and a city south of Da Nang called Chu Lai. And that operation, those patrols, which lasted 24 plus hours at a time, gave me very good insight to that area of Vietnam, especially the coast, and especially those people that were on the water besides us, fishermen, trawlers, boats like that. After my year in Vietnam, I was assigned to the Naval Investigative Services headquarters just outside Washington, D.C., and some of you may know NIS as the predecessor to NCIS, and NCIS is a very popular weekly television series starring Mark Harmon. It is essentially responsible for crimes committed by Navy and Marine personnel and crimes committed against Navy and Marine personnel. So I was in that role for about 6 months, and an opportunity came up to transfer 3 gunboats to the Turkish Navy. These were bigger than swift boats. They were armed much differently than swift boats. Their size gave them a crew of about 20 on there, and their primary mission in Turkey was anti-submarine warfare. I went over to Turkey, transferred those boats successfully to the Turkish Navy, and returned to the United States. When I returned, I was assigned to Puerto Rico to the commander of the Caribbean Sea Frontier. This is an admiral in charge of the sea frontier that consists of the area immediately south of Key West to the South American northern coast and all those islands that were in there. It had its heyday much before I got there. Its primary mission was to restrict the movement of German submarines during the Second World War, German submarines from the Atlantic into the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico. After those 4.5 years, and if you were counting, I had 5 assignments in those 4.5 years. That's very different. That's very unusual. Most people will have the same assignment for that period of time if that's all they're going to stay in the service. So all 5 of mine were very exceptional experiences, not because I was an exceptional person, I think primarily because of the interruption of the first assignment with Vietnam and swift boats. And then the subsequent ones came after that. So after I got out of the service, I think I lived a fairly normal life, have a family, have 2 daughters, had a career, still have my career. I do executive search for independent community hospitals. And independent community hospitals are those that tend to exist in smaller, more rural communities. There are about 55 of them in the state of Ohio, as an example. And my searches are focused on the presidents of those hospitals and have done quite a few presidential searches for them. My transition from being a writer to from not being a writer was fairly gradual. I can say honestly that I always wanted to write, but I didn't have a lot of motivation to do so. A large part of what I did in my job was writing, and writing to senior executives and writing about senior executives. So it was not completing a form, it was creative writing, it was individualized to all of the candidates that I had in all of the searches and to all of the boards that employed us, the boards of the hospitals that employed us to do those searches. But about 6 years ago, I decided I wanted to start writing. Well, then I became a master procrastinator. Well, I'm going to start writing, but I'm going to wait until the holidays are past us. I'm going to get Thanksgiving behind. I'm going to get Christmas. I'm going to get New Year. Then I'm going to start writing. Well, I procrastinated. And there might be some family events. There would be an anniversary or a wedding or a graduation. Whatever it was, I procrastinated. I'm going to do it after that happens. And I never did it. Well, what changed? Something out of the blue. My wife and I were invited to attend a religious retreat. There were some 20, maybe as many as 25 other couples at a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 3-day religious retreat held by a retreat master who happened to be a priest. None of us knew this fellow, so when we began, he introduced himself talking about what he had done in his career. And a large part of what he had done in his career was writing. And all of a sudden it clicked with me. You know, I want to be a writer. I've procrastinated. I've done other things. This guy has put it together. I'm going to ask him at the end of this retreat how he did it. What advice does he have for me? So when we're all saying goodbye, I went up to him and I told him that. I want to be a writer. I have not done so yet. What do you suggest that I do? And he said to me, just write. And I'm telling you, those two words did everything. The clouds parted. The burden was off my shoulders. The hindrances, the shackles, the obstacles, they disappeared. I started to write. And I say parenthetically to anybody who's watching this who may have that hang up, you want to do it, but you don't know how to start, you don't know what to do, you've got a bunch of other things in your life, just write. You will be good at it. As you edit it and as you do it more, you will become better and you will become even better. Just write. Okay, so how do I get to the point of writing this book, Operation Cua Thu, The Last Mission in Vietnam? The first thing I wanted to decide on, and I had already decided this, but the first thing I had to do was to determine what genre I was going to write in. I couldn't see myself writing a romance novel or science fiction or about the occult or any of those kinds of things. What did I enjoy? What did I read? What was my motivation? And it was thrillers. It was mysteries. It was suspense. It was intrigue, espionage, spies, those kinds of things. Big boys' fantasies. And I loved it. So I decided I was going to write a thriller. The next thing I wanted to do was to determine who the character, the main character, the protagonist in this story and subsequent stories. I don't want to write a book, I want to write. So I want to write several books. And I have written 2 others, not published yet as this one is, but have written 2 others and am on my 4th. And the protagonist I decided on, I named Mike Cummins. And Mike Cummins was an ex-swiftboat officer. Do I have to pause and let you know how that came about? All right. It's not just a reflection of me. It's really, Mike is really a combination of a number of people that I knew when I was in the service. And there are parts of me in there, but it's really a combination. So I've got now a genre, a thriller. I've got a protagonist, Mike Cummins. Now what do I want to write about? I've been thinking that I want to write and I want to hook what I write to an event that happened in history. I have to be very careful and I want to be very specific about this, and I want you to understand clearly what I'm saying. I am not putting Mike into those events and having him work within the event, having him affect the event. I'm putting him in at the same time the event is going on. So the event provides some detail, the event provides some context, the event provides some timing, some sequence, but it's not integral to the story. And the first event that I decided on was the fall of Saigon in April of 1975. And I started writing this book several years ago, so it's only happenstance that we're also experiencing something similar with Kabul and Afghanistan right now. There are parallels, but there are many, many differences, and some of those differences are very significant. But anyhow, when you think about the fall of Saigon and the fall of Kabul, you will normally, and I think naturally, come to a feeling of desperation. Those men and women over there are desperate, many of them to get out. Many of them are fearing for their lives. So that was the case in Saigon in April of 1975. I created another character, and this man was the head of intelligence, capital I, for South Vietnam, General Nguyen Dinh Ba. And General Ba had been in his job for several years. He knew where the bodies were buried. He knew where the spies, he knew who the counter spies were. He knew who the agents, the double agents. He knew a lot of things, and a lot of people were very interested in what General Ba had as information. General Ba also realized he could not just leave Saigon. He couldn't just get on a plane and leave. The North Vietnamese would know that. They would follow him. They would find him. They would kidnap him. they would bring him back to Vietnam, they would torture him, and they would kill him. That is clear. So General Ba realized that he had to somehow sneak out of Vietnam so that people didn't know where he went. So he approached a man called Neil Barnett, and Neil was the station chief for the CIA in Southeast Asia and had been General Ba's contact for several years. So General Ba proposes to Neil that he will give him this treasure trove of intelligence that he has, and he will provide this information to him if Neil Barnett helps the general get out safely from Vietnam. Neil, of course, agrees to this. This is the kind of information that puts the United States at a decided advantage, perhaps for as much as a generation, maybe more. So they put their heads together and they figure out that General Ba is going to leave Saigon, go to someplace as of yet unidentified, and Neil will provide transportation from that place back to the Philippines, where he is stationed and where he is in contact with the Commander-in-Chief of the Pacific Fleet, Admiral Jenkins. The details start coming together. General Ba gives a signal, to Neil saying, I'm leaving such and such a night. I'm going to be ready for pickup, and doesn't yet tell him where, in 3 days. Now Neil has to put together a crew to man and to bring a top secret Chinese-built Cua Thu class gunboat from the Philippines to Da Nang. Doesn't know it's Da Nang yet, just knows it's Vietnam. And this Cua Thu class boat is hidden in a seaplane hangar in Subic Bay in the naval station in the Philippines. This is a CIA boat. Neil knows all about it. He talks to the admiral. He says, we've got to get somebody to man this boat, to lead this crew over there, to pick up General Ba and bring him back. Who do we have? Who is available? And they look through all the people that are in Subic Bay at the time, and they come up with Mike Cummins, who is an ex-Swift boat officer who happens to be on a ship that happens to be in Subic Bay at this moment in time. They asked Mike to come in and interview, not telling him why he's to be interviewed, but telling him that this is an important assignment, and they want him to describe what he remembers about Da Nang, what he remembers about that part of Vietnam, and what he can tell them about his own experiences as a Swift boat officer. So that interview happens. The Admiral and Neil decide that Mike is their guy. They realize he has to volunteer for this, so they tell him a little bit more about it. It involves Vietnam. It obviously involves him going over there on a boat. And will he do this? Mike has some questions. He goes off into an office by himself, spends about an hour there putting his questions together, comes back in and tells the Admiral and Neil Barnett that he volunteers, he'll do it. Okay, Neil says you've got 2 days and only 2 days. You got to put a crew together. You personally have to find out about this boat. You have to understand what its capabilities are. You have to get ready to go. We don't have a plan for you. You're going to have to make it up on the way over there and once you get over there. So the next 2 days are spent doing exactly that. Him interviewing and putting together a crew, him learning about the boat, determining its capabilities, and getting ready to go. About 6 hours before they're supposed to go, Mike has a thought, and that thought is not a pleasant one. It says if they are over there, it is highly likely they're going to be discovered. If they're discovered, that means whoever is in Da Nang at that time, North Vietnamese, Viet Cong, whomever, is going to spend a lot of effort to stop them doing what they are intended to do, which is to bring General Ba out. That means they're going to be fired at. that almost assuredly means they're going to be fired at and hit. Take it one step further, some of the crew, maybe all of the crew, is going to be wounded. Maybe some of those wounds are going to be severe. A first aid kit on the boat is not going to cut it. We need a corpsman. Neil agrees. He goes to the admiral, says, look, we've only got 6 hours, but can you get a corpsman to come on the boat? The admiral says, we can do that. He calls over to the Navy hospital in Subic Bay, speaks to the officer in charge, tells him 6 hours, corpsman. He'll be gone for a week, maybe 2. That's all I'm going to tell you. Send somebody over to my residence, the admiral. The admiral and Neil are intending to go over to this seaplane hangar to see Mike, the crew, and this corpsman and the swift boat off at 2:30 the following morning. So the captain at the Navy hospital scurries around to find somebody and finds a personnel record of a Paul McElroy, a Navy nurse who's just been assigned to Subic Bay. Has already arrived, but is not scheduled to start for another week. McElroy could be perfect. Sends for McElroy to come to his office and is shocked when he finds out Paul is not Paul, but is Paul, no middle initial A, Paul McElroy, a woman. So takes her over to the admiral's residence. The admiral doesn't bat an eye. The admiral has daughters himself, wants these opportunities and others to be available to women in the military. 1975, not too many of these roles exist, and certainly this would be a breakthrough if it did. Welcomes her. She, the admiral, and Neil Barnett go over to the seaplane hangar, introduce Mike to Paula McElroy. He's not concerned. He's got bigger fish to be concerned about, and he's got less than now 2 hours to get ready to go. Welcomes her, introduces her to the crew, and says that the crew is going to embrace her, especially if one of them gets wounded. So no problem with having a woman on board. 2:30 the next morning, off goes the Swatow class boat on a 2-day voyage to Da Nang. In this 2-day period, the crew learns the boat. The crew becomes a crew, learns itself as much as anything else, but learns about the boat, fires the weapons, looks at the engineering and navigational capabilities, and gets to Vietnam. There are 2 simultaneous stories going on at this point. The one I've just described to you, that's Mike putting the crew together, making other decisions, and then getting the boat over to Vietnam. The second story is General Ba and his 2 senior staff officers leaving Saigon and traversing about 600 miles overland to Da Nang. During this 2.5, 3-day trip, they run into a number of obstacles, the least of which would be roadblocks, which they're able to disguise their way around and talk their way through. But not one of those. One of those is a very harrowing experience. Gunfire is exchanged, people are killed, and it's not General Ba and his 2 staff officers. They finally get to Da Nang, being followed this entire time by a fellow from the North Vietnamese army that has been assigned to find him. They know he's gone. They don't know where he is. They're trying to piece together some of the things they hear on his trip up to Da Nang, and when he assassinates 3 guards at a roadblock near Cam Ranh Bay, they're now convinced this is him. They got to get this guy up there. He's got to get Ba. Well, he fails getting Ba. Ba gets to Da Nang. Ba gets out on the Da Nang harbor, and here comes the Swatow in to pick him up. And that's all I'm going to tell you. From this point forward, you've got to read the book. You've got to find out what happens. There are twists and turns aplenty. I think there's action and tension aplenty. and I want you all to enjoy it. The book is available on Amazon in Kindle format as well as paperback, and you are welcome to also get the book from me in paperback. This is my email address. If you write to me, if you order it at $17.99 plus tax, but if you also have questions about the writing, the book, if you have comments about it or comments that you want to make to me, I would welcome them. I would certainly answer any of the questions that you have to the best of my ability. So that's Operation Cua Thu, the last mission in Vietnam, and it was the last mission in Vietnam. I appreciate you listening to this, and I will end by thanking again Lakewood Public Library for this opportunity. It's greatly appreciated.